Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. Donald Trump has virtually clinched the Republican nomination after his closest rival, Senator Ted Cruz, suspends his campaign following a devastating defeat in the Indiana primary. Trump won about 53% of the vote, capturing 51 delegates in the winner-take-all state. In his concession speech, Senator Cruz shocked his supporters by announcing his withdrawal.
From the beginning, I've said that I would continue on as long as there was a viable path to victory. Tonight, I'm sorry to say, it appears that path has been foreclosed. Together, we left it all on the field in Indiana. We gave it everything we've got. But the voters chose another path.
In the Democratic race, Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders pulled a surprise upset in Indiana by winning over 52% of the vote. We'll have more on the results later in the broadcast. The Bernie Sanders campaign has launched a petition urging the Hillary Clinton campaign to transfer money raised by her massive joint fundraising venture to state parties. This comes after a Politico investigation into the unprecedented fundraising vehicle Clinton formed with state parties found less than 1% of the $61 million raised by the venture has actually gone to the state parties. The Hillary Victory Fund is a joint venture between the Democratic National Committee, 32 state committees, and Clinton's campaign. It allows Clinton to collect massive donations at events like the recent dinner at George and Amal Clooney's house. But it turns out that of the $3.8 million the Victory Fund has transferred to the state parties, 88% of it was quickly moved back to the DNC by the Clinton staffer who controls the committee. In Syria, fierce fighting has erupted between rebels and the Syrian regime in the city of Aleppo. The Syrian Observatory for Human Rights said the battle was the most intense the city has seen for more than a year. Dozens have reportedly been killed. This comes after at least 3 people were killed when a maternity hospital in a government-controlled section of the city was hit by rocket fire. Secretary of State John Kerry said the rockets appeared to have come from a rebel area.
Today's attack on a hospital appears to be rockets that have come from some area of opposition, and we are trying to determine precisely which. So the bottom line is there is no justification for this horrific violence that targets civilians or medical facilities or first responders, no matter who it is.
The hospital attack came days after the Syrian regime destroyed a Doctors Without Borders-backed hospital, killing the last pediatrician in the rebel-held East Aleppo. The UN Security Council has unanimously passed a resolution reminding states they must protect medical and aid workers. But Joanne Liu, president of Doctors Without Borders, noted 4 of the 5 permanent members of the UN Security Council have been tied to attacks on hospitals, including the United States for its destruction of a hospital in Kunduz, Afghanistan. Liu said the attacks must stop.
4 of the 5 permanent members of this council have, to varying degrees, been associated with coalition responsible for attacks on health structure over the last year. These include the NATO-led coalition in Afghanistan, the Saudi-led coalition in Yemen, the Russia-backed Syrian-led coalition.
U.S. Navy SEAL Charles Keating IV has been killed in northern Iraq. The Pentagon said Keating was serving as an advisor to Kurdish Peshmerga forces and died as a result of a, quote, coordinated and complex attack by about 100 ISIS militants. Keating is the grandson of Charles Keating, Jr., the late financier who served prison time for his role in the 1980s savings and loan scandals. In Canada, a raging wildfire has forced tens of thousands of people to evacuate from the heart of the Alberta oil sands region. The entire community of Fort McMurray has been ordered to leave. It's the largest wildfire evacuation in Alberta's history. Scientists have linked the increase in wildfires to climate change. The Detroit Teachers Union has urged teachers to return to work today after teacher sick-outs over a funding shortfall shuttered nearly all of the district's 97 schools for a second day Tuesday. The teachers called out after learning the district may not have the money to pay them at the end of the school year. But union officials say they've now received assurances that teachers will be paid. Detroit teachers have also protested black mold, rat infestations, and other dire conditions in their schools. Georgia Republican Governor Nathan Deal has vetoed a bill that would have allowed people to carry concealed weapons on college campuses. In a statement, Deal said it was, quote, highly questionable the measure would make students safer. A similar measure became law in Tennessee this year. In Honduras, a prominent radio journalist has been shot 4 times but survived. FELIX Molina was reportedly attacked twice in the same day Monday. He was shot twice in each leg. In a statement released by a human rights group, Molina said he believed he was directly targeted and vowed to continue practicing journalism without fear. He said, quote, I declare myself a survivor of the insecurity that the majority of the country faces. Molina's shooting came on the eve of World Press Freedom Day. Labor activists targeted the clothing retailer H&M over the safety of its supplier factories in Bangladesh. As H&M shareholders met in Sweden, organizers rallied in front of the Times Square H&M store in New York to demand safe conditions.
My name is Elizabeth Klein. I'm a journalist and the author of Overdress, The Shockingly High Cost of Cheap Fashion, and I'm out here today to demand that H&M provide safe working conditions for their Bangladeshi factory workers. They have over 100,000 workers in making their clothes in Bangladesh, and currently the majority of them are working in facilities without legal fire exits. So their lives are literally on the line in the name of making cheap clothes for Western consumers. No one should die in the name of making cheap fashion.
In February, an H&M supplier factory in Bangladesh caught fire early in the morning before most of the factory's 6,000 workers arrived. In Washington state, 6 workers at the Hanford nuclear site have undergone medical evaluations for possible exposure to chemical vapors. In total, more than 30 workers are being evaluated for possible exposure to vapors resulting from radioactive waste from the U.S. nuclear weapons program, which is stored in underground tanks at the site. Last month, it was revealed thousands of gallons of radioactive waste had leaked between 2 walls of one of the tanks, an incident a former worker called catastrophic. Former New York State Assembly Speaker Sheldon Silver has been sentenced to 12 years in prison after being convicted of corruption charges. Silver served as New York Assembly Speaker for over 2 decades and was one of New York's most powerful politicians. He was convicted of abusing his office to rake in more than $4 million in illegal bribes and kickbacks. In New York City, voters who say they were blocked from casting a ballot in last month's New York presidential primary packed a Board of Elections hearing on Tuesday. Some 126,000 Brooklyn voters were purged from the Democratic rolls ahead of the primary. Voting rights activist Yvonne Guggelet spoke out.
May 5th, the New York City Board of Elections has to hand over their primary results, and that percentage, that number, is certified. If those votes are certified, no evidence that we find will matter in the court of law. If the votes are certified by the New York City Board of Elections on May 5th at 3:30 p.m., nothing that we find in the future is going to change that primary result. And so we as activists are working alongside with the lawyers in court, Election Justice USA. They are fighting to get a court order. They are trying to stop the elections from getting certified. We are here at the Board of Elections to put pressure on them, ask questions, tell them what happened, find out what's going on.
An Indian man who follows the Sikh religion is speaking out after he says he was pulled off a bus and detained for 30 hours for speaking Punjabi with another passenger. DALJEET SINGH was traveling on a Greyhound bus from Arizona to Indiana when a fellow passenger falsely accused the two men of speaking Arabic and discussing a bomb threat. Fellow passengers detained the men in Amarillo, Texas, until police arrived and arrested them at gunpoint. The police also removed Singh's religious turban and circulated mugshots of him without the turban to local media. Singh and the Sikh coalition have demanded criminal charges against the passengers who accused and restrained him. Meanwhile, in California, a group of women say they were kicked out of a cafe in Laguna Beach last month for being Muslim and wearing hijabs. Sarah Forsak said she and her friends were told to leave the restaurant within 10 minutes while their desserts and coffee were still on the table. A worker said the restaurant needed to clear tables for other clients, but Forsak said there were numerous empty tables and other customers were not asked to leave. President Obama's heading to Flint, Michigan today. His visit comes weeks after 3 Michigan officials were criminally charged for their involvement in the Flint water contamination crisis. The lead poisoning began when an unelected emergency manager appointed by Michigan Governor Snyder switched the source of Flint's drinking water to the corrosive Flint River. Obama's expected to meet today with Mariana Kopeny, an 8-year-old Flint girl who wrote to him asking him to come to Flint. She wrote, "I am one of the children that's affected by this water, and I've been doing my best to march and protest and to speak out for all the kids that live here in Flint." To see our documentary, Thirsty for Democracy, The Poisoning of an American City, that's about Flint, you can go to democracynow.org. And Afeni Shakur, a former Black Panther activist and mother of the late hip-hop artist Tupac Shakur, has died at the age of 69. Afeni Shakur's activism was a source of inspiration for her son's music. Tupac Shakur was killed in a still unsolved drive-by shooting in Las Vegas in 1996. Afeni Shakur died in California Monday after suffering what is believed to be a heart attack. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. We are broadcasting from Atlanta, Georgia. Juan Gonzalez is in New York. Hello, Juan.
Hello, Amy, and welcome to all of our listeners and viewers around the country and around the world.